Okay, let's just set the foundation here. Where did the good inside approach to relationships come from, and what makes it different from everything else out there?
So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I, for years, was seeing adults in my private practice for individual therapy, for couples therapy. I was seeing teens for a variety of issues. And I felt really good about the way I was working with adults. I was really seeing results. I am a big believer that the way we were raised has massive impact. And actually, a lot of our problems in the present come from kind of mixing up our past from our present, being able to separate that. And then I'd also be working with parents, but not necessarily in therapy, but giving them advice about their kids. My kid's having tantrums, my kid's lying to me, my kid's hitting, my kid's anxious, they're the only one who won't do soccer. And I was going through this deep training, the kind of gold standard training for how to help parents help kids. And I was hearing myself say it in my practice. And this thing just kept building in me. Or I was thinking, everything I'm telling adults in one session in therapy is the polar opposite of everything I'm telling parents to do with their kids. And theoretically, there just can't be a way that everything that helps adults change their lives would be in opposition with what children need when they're young. And this thing kept building, and I was telling parents how to kind of give a timeout, and your kid hit, and here's how you send them to their room, and you can't reinforce the behavior. But seriously, I had this awful feeling in my body. And I was just thinking, if I was at my worst, right, and my husband was like, go to your room, I'll tell you when you can come out, or on the flip side, if he's like, if you're nicer, I'll give you a sticker, and 10 stickers equals a diamond necklace, I don't know. I just can't imagine our relationship would be at a good place if that's what we were resorting to. But we do this with our kids over and over. And I think this thing started to build in me enough that I just started to question things, like question all these assumptions. Like, okay, well, if I don't send my kid to their room, why does that mean I approve of their behavior? People tell us like that's a fact, but what if that's not a fact? What do I need when I'm at my worst? I certainly wouldn't need someone to throw me a party, but there's a lot between throwing someone a party and punishing them, right? And at the core, I realized that the system we've been all taught to raise our kids, timeouts, punishments, consequences, rewards, stickers, ignoring, praise, is simply a system of behavioral control. No one likes to say that, but it is, because your kid has a behavior, and all you're doing is seeing them as a person as their latest behavior. And we know as adults that when we're at our worst behavior, it is so critical if we're gonna change for someone to see us as more than our latest behavior. And there's two key things I think we need to separate that this other system that we've all been taught really doesn't separate. And those are behavior and identity, right? So my kid hits. Maybe it's an employee at work is late. Two different examples, exact same way of thinking. Am I going to see someone, they're late, or my kid hit, that bad behavior means they're a bad person. Behavior, identity are collapsed. Or can I separate those two things and think, I have a good kid who hit. I have a good kid, they're still good inside, and they engage in a bad behavior. I have a good employee who's late. And that simple difference, whether we look at someone's behavior and collapse it and assume we know who they are, or whether we can separate those two and you assume this is a person who's good inside, this is a good person who's having a hard time. The way we intervene is truly a complete 180. And so once I kind of strip back the assumptions of these behavioral models, I think I was just left with one thing from a first principles approach. People are born good inside. That of itself could be a revolution in the world, but that's what I was left with. And then I thought, if people are born good inside, well, why do people do bad things? And then there are a whole lot of reasons why we do bad things. But when I had that assumption, I saw people as good, and then I started thinking people just need to learn skills. People need to learn skills for how to be on time. People need to learn skills for how to manage their anger. When we're upset at work, we all act things out if people don't understand us. And if we get to that core, it feels better, and actually the results are much quicker and a lot more effective.
Gosh, I love this because I just genuinely believe with every ounce of my being that one of the great marks of an exceptional leader is their ability to give feedback all the time. But when you're giving feedback, whether it's praise or criticism, both of which I think are important, and people hate the word criticism, but I believe praise is affirmation, criticism is investment. It's only productive if it's given thoughtfully. And when we met, we did this, we were both at the same thing, and we exchanged books, and we were literally, I was at a restaurant dining alone, reading her book, and I was sending her pictures from her book, and she was doing it in the same return, because the lessons are truly transferable.
Yeah.
Okay, if you haven't fallen down the rabbit hole of Dr. Becky, and you do, you're gonna find yourself using these little isms and these acronyms, and then you'll know whether you found someone else in her tribe based on whether they actually understand what the hell you're saying. It's kind of fun.
If you get it tattooed, you really know.
So MGI, let's talk about
Yes.
that. What does that mean, and how can you use it at work?
Yes, so I'm a very practical person, and I really do have a hard time understanding ideas if I can't translate them into action. So I hate having ideas that can't be translated into immediately actionable strategy. So I think this idea that people are good inside, that you can separate someone's good identity from their bad behavior, is insanely powerful, but it's not actionable enough for me. And to me, this is just how you make it actionable. Asking yourself the question, what is the most generous interpretation of this person's behavior, will change your relationships, where you work, in your partnership, with your kids. Because most of us default to what I call a LGI, a least generous interpretation. And if you have kids, you know this. You see your kid and they won't share with their cousin, and immediately you're like, my kid's a sociopath, they're gonna go to jail. It's just so fast. And my kid's 3, And then what happens is you actually intervene with someone from the place of your interpretation. So because now I'm filled with all this anxiety about my kid and this kind of what I call a fast forward error about the type of person they're gonna be, I'm gonna intervene with him or her when she's 3 based on this whole kind of fast forward fear. Not helpful. If I ask myself, what is the most generous interpretation of why my kid might share, I might think, my kid's 3, maybe they don't know they're gonna get it back. Maybe their cousin always takes stuff from them, who knows? Same thing, why is my employee always late? I've told them they have to be on time. The least generous interpretation, there's nothing to be ashamed of, it comes up quicker for all of us because we see the behavior, it's the observable thing, and so we shortcut to a negative interpretation. They don't respect me. It's often what we make of people's bad behavior. They don't respect me. They don't care. And then talking about criticism, we intervene from that place. What's wrong with you? We intervene like we're on the opposite team. As soon as you feel like you're on the opposite team as someone you work with, you should immediately stop talking to them because nothing can be effective from that place. It's the essence of defensiveness. I feel like you're on the opposite team. I have to defend my inner goodness because you're attacking it, and we think we're talking to each other, but all we're saying to each other is, I'm a good person, no, I'm a good person, no, I'm a good person, until someone screams and we blow up. We have to get to a place where we feel like we're on the same team. It's not me and you where you're the problem, it's me and you against a problem. We're on the same team against anyone being late because it's bad for our culture. And if I have a most generous interpretation, I'm probably gonna say, hey, look, I'd even say this from the start, we're in the same team here. I know you know we have to be on time. I know you care about this workplace. There must be something getting in your way. I know things have gotten in my way before. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's figure it out. And what you're going to uncover is you're gonna learn something new, you're gonna strengthen your relationship, and you're gonna actually get to the core of understanding why someone's late. We can't ever fix a problem if you don't understand a problem. It would be like trying to fix someone's tennis swing without looking, is it the grip, is it their strength? You don't know, right? You're just kind of making more of a mess. So that question, and if that's a new muscle, I encourage everyone to ask it after the fact. You had a hard day at work, you're annoyed with an employee, a partner, your kid. Before you go to bed, just say, okay, I'm really annoyed that this person kind of made this mistake again. Let me flex that muscle. Like, what is the most generous interpretation of that person's behavior? And it forces you to see the good person under the bad behavior, and that will help you intervene from that place.
All of this stuff, by the way, like you hear her talking, right? And it sounds so simple and yet it's hard. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and literally I've been like consuming her content, and I'm gonna be a better dad. And then my son, like 1.5 years old, he did something the other day, and I was like, this mother, and he hates me. He is out to ruin my world. And the reason I say that is because I believe being a good leader is not a destination, it's an aspiration, right? We hear this stuff and we try and we fail and we try and we fail, and the failures don't define you. It's the fact that you just keep on getting up and trying to do a little bit better the next day than you did the day before that does. But you do need to be sturdy, and this is another one of our things. What does it mean to be a sturdy leader?
Yeah. So that's the term I think about a lot. Actually, I think about Good Inside as an approach to sturdy leadership. And the system I tend to like focusing on just happens to be the system of a family. But being a sturdy leader in your family is the exact same from a principal perspective as being a sturdy leader at work. And I think the word sturdy, I just like words that have a feeling to them. It allows me to understand something more quickly. And sturdiness to me is the essence of what anyone in the workplace is looking for, right? Where they know where you are. I always think about this, I can locate you. And I also feel like you look at me like you like me, right? Both things at once. And when I think about a sturdy leader, there are 2 main jobs we have to be a sturdy leader. And this is true when you're leading your home, you're leading your work, when you're a leader anywhere. And those 2 jobs are boundaries and empathy, or boundaries and validation. It's kind of boundaries is kind of how we establish to a system, I'm keeping everyone safe. And validation and empathy is how we establish to people that we're connected to them and we care about them. Both are incomplete systems. And actually, everyone is probably naturally better at one of those sides than the other. And it's just really important to know which side you lean toward, because it gives you insight into how to kind of balance out your brand of sturdy leadership. So I want to define both, because again, I think we can't really intervene if we don't understand something. And boundaries in particular are something where I think we often get it wrong. So here's my definition of boundaries. Boundaries are what you tell someone you will do, and it requires the other person to do nothing. That definition is really important. And I know for me in my life, it's important because so often we say these things. She doesn't respect my boundaries. He's always crossing my boundaries. I set boundaries and they never listen. If you think about the definition, my boundary is something I tell someone I will do, and it requires the other person to do nothing. No one can cross my boundaries with that definition. It's not even an option, which is really empowering. So I'll give an example, right? Let's say someone's always late to, some staff meeting you have. You're like, you have to be on time. You have to be on time, right? And then we say they still weren't on time. They don't listen. They don't respect my boundaries. I like this definition because I can say, okay, did I even set a boundary? Did I tell someone what I would do? No. Does the success of my boundary require the other person to do nothing? No. So what I did was I made a request. We often make requests when we tell ourselves we're setting boundaries. And requests are important. We make requests all the time. But if something has to happen, you would never have a pilot say, I just want to vote and make sure you're all good with an emergency landing. Are you good? Everyone good? Does that work? Oh, you're going to ruin your plan? Okay, forget it. No way. In that situation, you want a pilot to set a boundary. You want the pilot to say what they're going to do. In this meeting situation, what I would say is, hey, I'm always going to start a meeting on time. And I just want to let you know it's been hard for you to come on time. We could talk about that later. If you come in a little bit late, I'm not going to repeat what I said. And I'm going to consider it your responsibility to talk to XYZ people in the meeting to figure out what happened. That would be an example of the boundary. My boundary is not dependent on someone else's cooperation. I mean this, I respect my leadership way too much to put its success in someone else's hands. That's a boundary. Now, validation and empathy is the other part of our job because everyone has reactions to our boundaries, right? If I say that to someone at Good Inside where I work, no one says to me, "You are such an inspiring, sturdy leader. That was an amazing boundary. I learned so much. You're the best." No, someone might roll their eyes or they'll be like, "Oh, you're so rigid," right? At which point, instead of seeing that as a failure with this model, you could think, "Oh, this is amazing. I get to do the other part of my job now. I'm just going to say check, check. Oh, you wish I would repeat what I said. I get that." I'm validating what they're saying. I'm setting a boundary. Someone else is always going to have a feeling about our boundary, and then I can validate that person's feeling while continuing to hold their boundary. Now, this is very important about validation. When I validate someone's feeling, maybe someone's upset they didn't get a promotion, and I say, "Oh, I get that, tell me more. Oh, you were really thinking it was gonna go your way. Oh, because of your good review, okay, I'm putting the dots together." That doesn't mean I agree with their feelings. That doesn't mean I would feel the same way. That doesn't mean I'm condoning a certain behavior that came from the feeling, and it definitely does not mean I'm changing my decision. There are just two things that are true, that sturdy leaders set boundaries and sturdy leaders validate other people's feelings because we're not threatened by them. Because we know we can make a decision and other people can be upset. And so when they do let us know they're upset, we see it as an opportunity to connect with them. We don't feel like our leadership is under attack by their feelings. This is the same thing with our kids, right? Screen time is over. My kids have never said to me, "You're right. Solid decision, Mom." Never. Never. "Thank you for protecting my brain." No. They whine. Everyone else has more screen time. "You're so annoying." At which point I try, some percentage of the time, to say, I believe you. Your friends, I get it. Or I might say, "I honestly always have a hard time putting down my phone and my screens too. It stinks. It's really, really hard." Does that mean I'm letting them watch another show? 0%, unless I've made the decision that I want to change, but I usually don't. Screen time is over. My kids whine. "Oh, you wish you could watch another show." I'm gonna turn the TV off if you can't do it yourself. They're still upset until they're not. So sturdy leadership really goes back to those jobs. And again, it's a way of reflecting after, did I do that? Did I set a boundary, a true boundary? Am I also able to validate someone else's feelings? And when you do both those things, and they often happen in tandem, you're really embodying being a sturdy leader. I'm making this all seem easier than it is. Like, this is not, I just want to be clear, like what Will said, this is not something I do 100% of the time either at all, and we'll get to what to do when you can't. But to me, it's just helpful to have frameworks to come back to, right? Because when something's really hard anywhere in life, we think we need a solution. We actually don't. We just need clarity on what's happening and what our role is. When you have clarity on a problem and what your role is, it's amazing the relief you feel immediately. And so to me, I call these things family jobs or the jobs of a sturdy leader. That's the thing that helps me get grounded. Okay, what's going on? Am I doing my job? I'm not. What do I do? Okay, and even before I've interacted with my kids or interacted with my employees, I actually feel better because I have clarity.
Okay, so we're like kind of taking your whole thing and bringing it to business, but I've ran into a few people today who are like, "Thank you so much for bringing her here. I'm a parent." And so like just for them.
Yeah.
I want to just draw into the boundaries thing a little more. I'm going to come up with a random hypothetical. If you have like an 18-month-old son who won't stop biting his sister, what do you do about that? Just for you guys. What's the...
Perfectly applicable to the work
to everyone in the room.
too. But this is actually a great example. Because with parents and with leadership, this is what we often do. Stop biting. I often picture a kid being like, "You're watching me not able to stop doing something, and your best intervention is to tell me to stop doing it." You know? And then they do get more dysregulated, and we think it's because they're testing us. It's not. It's because their experience is there an adult around me who's going to stop me from doing bad things? And if there's not, no wonder their behavior gets worse, because they feel unsafe. A boundary isn't saying stop, and it's definitely not saying we don't. Your kids know you don't bite, I hope, right? And really, so those aren't boundaries. A boundary is something we tell someone we will do, and it requires the other person do nothing. If your kid bites on a play date or bites near you, you need to be close to your kid. And if they say anything, I'm gonna stay here because my number one job, that's something I used to say to my kids all the time when they were young, my number one job is to keep you safe. And so I'm gonna be watching if it looks like you're about to have a hard time, and I'm gonna pick you up and bring you to the side, and we're gonna take a deep breath. I mean, I'm gonna take the deep breath, probably not my 18-month-old, and then we're gonna figure it out together. I'm gonna stop my kid from doing the bad behavior in the first place, right? None of us would watch a 5-year-old run into the New York City street and say, if you run into the street again, no TV tonight. Can you imagine? You're just gonna stop them from running into the street. They are telling you they don't have the skills to not bite. How are they telling you that? By biting. If they had the skills, they would, right? Ross Greene, amazing, he says, kids do well when they can. Guess what? Adults do well when they can. And so I'm just gonna stop, and if my kid does bite, which of course I'm gonna pull them to the side, and the words I'm gonna use are, I won't let you. It's an assertion of sturdy leadership. And the reason I'm saying I won't let you bite and I'm gonna pull my kid is not to show my kid who's boss. It actually comes from the idea that I know my kid's a good kid. I'm not gonna let them do a bad thing. I love them too much. With the biting or the hitting, we always think about protecting the kid who's bit or protecting the kid who's hit. Sure, those kids need protection. You know who really needs protection? The kid doing the biting, the kid doing the hitting, because we don't want them to form an identity of being a bad kid. And when we say stop biting, I said to stop, I'm gonna count to 3, now no TV, now no dessert. Meanwhile, that night, I give them dessert anyway and make up a lie about how I changed my mind. They feel like they're a bad kid. That's really important. I'll take a moment. Exactly.
I don't do that. So we're good. Okay. Hospitality.
Okay.
I think hospitality is being creative and intentional in pursuit of relationships. Of all the relationship strategies out there, what do you think is the most important in our personal and our professional lives?
So this is my favorite question because, and I always try to talk about this before I end, because the most important strategy in my mind to get good at in any important relationship you have is repair. Repair, to me, I'll define it, is the act of kind of going back to a moment that didn't feel good, taking responsibility for your part, and stating what you would do differently the next time. If you really want to go for the gold, you can also explore the other person's feelings about it. Okay? But at very least, you go back to a moment, you take ownership, you state what you would do differently the next time. And here's the amazing thing about repair being the most important relationship strategy with your kids or at work. You literally can't repair unless you mess up, right? And so what that means is, as helpful as these ideas might be some of the time, if you want to get good at the number one strategy, you have to mess up, right? So let's say with my kids or at work, where I'll get triggered, I'll yell, I'll be like, I'm gonna be a sturdy leader instead of I'm a reactive leader. We can go down a rabbit hole. Why? Let's go back to the first question. Because we see ourselves as our latest behavior. We take our yell and we make ourselves a bad person. Instead of, same idea, wait, I'm a good person who was having a hard time. And now, when I mess up, I have an opportunity to practice the most important relationship strategy ever. So what I try to say to myself, truly, after I yell at my kids, is I'm like, okay, trying to get good at repair. Step 1 is yelling at my kid. Crushed it, totally crushed it. The first step is always the hardest step. I did it, Okay, now I just have to do the repair part, right? And what would that sound like with my kid? Hey, I've been thinking about yelling at. I was thinking about yelling at you earlier in the kitchen. And this is the responsibility part. It's never your fault when I yell. And I know what we're thinking, kind of was his fault. He was complaining about dinner and he felt like it was really spoiled. It's never someone's fault when we yell. Our circuitry that leads us to be triggered was in place in our body way before we probably even interacted with the other person. And I know that when I think about my kid being in a relationship when they're older, and I don't know, let's say it's my son who comes home and his partner didn't pick up toilet paper like he or she said they would. If he yells and I hear, well, it's your fault, I'm yelling for not getting toilet paper, I can't imagine that would be a relationship pattern I would be proud of having seeded. Versus, whoa, yeah, I'm disappointed. It's never your fault when I yell and you deserve better, I'm sorry. Those patterns later on with our kids, those patterns we overhear in our workplace directly come from our leadership. So I'm gonna say to my son, it's never your fault when I yell. I'm working on staying calmer, even when I'm frustrated. Same thing at work. Hey, probably that happens too. I yelled at you earlier. Look, I was frustrated. We can kind of get into later why that was. It's never your fault when I yell. I'm not proud of that, I'm sorry, and I'm sure that felt bad. If you have any more thoughts about it, I'm open. Repairs are so powerful because what they do, I really mean this, they allow you to be a magician, okay? Because moments that happen that don't feel good in our relationships, they register in our body. They do, whether we like it or not, they're there. And that moment either lives, it's kind of like the end of a chapter, or we get to go back to that moment for someone and we kind of say, hey, let's reopen that chapter. I want to write a different ending. And then the title of the chapter changes, like the whole title. Instead of the whole chapter being, my boss was shitty to me, or instead of the title being, I was scared of my mom turned into scary mom. The title is, people make mistakes, and then they take ownership, and I'm someone who is deserving of being talked to in a respectful way. Now I feel closer to that person. And it is never too late to repair. One of the things I actually learned recently in the professional context is I was holding on to something about a year ago that I just didn't like the way I handled a process. I could have said, well, I was kind of inexperienced, but I just emailed this person out of the blue. I was like, hey, I've been thinking about this. I felt really bad, I kind of explained it. He wrote me back the nicest note, and then I thought about it. I was like, if anybody emailed me a year later, 5 years later, saying, hey, I've still been thinking about something, it feels awful, I'm so sorry, here's what I've learned, all I would think is, you've been holding that in mind? Oh my goodness, that feels so good. This is like a room of a ton of people, and whether this resonates in your personal life or your professional life, I really do think there's a ripple effect to repair because you heal something that was just left feeling bad. And I often do think I'm a person of action, to think if every single person here emailed, called, in person, said something, it doesn't have to be some grand thing, a whole repair takes 10 seconds, I really feel like we'd feel it, I really, really do. And so as you take different ideas, just know, no one's perfect, we're humans, we're not robots, and when you mess up, you really have this amazing opportunity to use the best relationship strategy there is, which is repair.
And there's no statute of limitations on caring about a person.
That's exactly right.
I think action items following things like this are pretty cool, and I think that's a beautiful invitation for all of us at some point in the next week to just reach out to someone that we're carrying something for and just do a little repair. I think you're amazing. I hope you all do too. I'm not just doing this to shill on her behalf. That app is unbelievable. If you have kids, get it. If you don't, as I think you've probably seen, this stuff is great for leaders just as it is for parents. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Dr. Becky Kennedy.